Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 34 of An Action Filmmaking Podcast. I'm Tommy DiNucci. As always, with me is Mike Messier, and we are here to talk about a topic that's very near and dear to us. Uh, we are big professional wrestling fans. Nobody knows it. Nobody can deny that. Make no bones about it. Uh, and today we're going to be talking about the innovator of violence himself, the one and only Tommy Dreamer.
Yes, he's a great wrestler. Tommy Dreamer has actually acted in several of your films, but he first made his name known in the ECW, Eastern Championship Wrestling, later Extreme Championship Wrestling. We'll talk a little bit about that, but mostly about his film work with you. But Tommy is a great guy. For anyone that's ever met him, most people will attest to that.
Yeah, we're really excited to chat about Tommy. I have so many great memories of making films with Tommy Dreamer over the last, 15 years almost. Tommy's one of the few actors to have been in the majority of my films. It's probably only a short handful. Let's put it this way: you could count more movies that he hasn't been in of mine than he has. So it's a fun day to chat about Tommy Dreamer. But before we get into that, Mike, what was your feedback like on last week's stunt episode?
I think it was one of our most highly viewed episodes, and because of the universal nature of the topic, at least for film people, I was able to share that episode in several Facebook groups and of film, and people seem to respond to it. And so once again, we appreciate and encourage everyone that watches and enjoys our show. Please copy and paste the URL into your, social media film groups or your own personal pages or whatever, because the more viewers we get, the better the show will be.
Yeah, I was really happy to see that last week. We got a lot of great numbers on the show. A lot of people were checking it out. Like Mike said, everybody turned up for the stunt show. So we really appreciate that. It's a cool topic and definitely something that we're going to factor in as we program these shows. It seems like people like these topics about, like an individual aspect of the filmmaking process. So that's something we're going to get into more in 2023. And like Mike said, we can't thank you enough. Anytime you have a chance to share, like, even, just click that like button. But the big thing is, obviously, if you could share it out to any of your social media platforms, we really appreciate that. But let's get right on into Tommy Dreamer, the legendary hardcore wrestling icon. Mike, let's talk briefly about, we want to make this episode as friendly to the non-wrestling fans as possible. Mike and I, like we've already said on the show, we're big fans, so it's easy for us to get wrapped up and lost in it all. But the big thing to realize about Tommy Dreamer, and Mike is going to kind of gloss over that a little bit, which is just the difference between regular pro wrestling, like you see on the WWE on television, and then a little bit of counterculture, a counterculture movement in the mid 90s called ECW, aka Extreme Championship Wrestling. A little bit of a different brand of entertainment than your standard wrestling match. Mike, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what was so special about ECW, what made that stand out, and how Tommy Dreamer was smack dab in the middle of it all?
I've been thinking about this, and I think the easiest way is to start with a metaphor, which is if for those that remember the early '90s music scene where you had Madonna and you had En Vogue and you had like a lot of Vanilla Ice type of acts, and then suddenly you had this thing called Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Mother Love Bone, and you had a movement of music called grunge from Seattle. So that's a good metaphor. It's a game changer. And although the grunge scene came and went for the most part, people still listen to Nirvana. I still see that smiling, happy face Nirvana T-shirt everywhere. Pearl Jam still very prominent, and so forth. ECW was the grunge of pro wrestling, Tommy. It came around pretty much around the same time, maybe a year or two later. ECW probably peaked in 97, 98. They were a more hardcore wrestling outfit in a couple of ways, namely in the first way, violence, just more chair shots, more blood, barbed wire, etc. Then also their storylines, which I think is overlooked. They were the first group that, and our buddy Tommy Dreamer was right in the middle of this, that actually did like what they called the lesbian angle with Tommy's future wife, Beulah McGillicuddy, and Kimona Wanalea. Leia. They had this kind of extreme three-way, which was pretty hardcore and extreme for the time for wrestling angles. And Tommy was right in the middle of it. Extreme Championship Wrestling. People might know Paul Heyman, who mostly works with Roman Reigns now in WWE. But Paul Heyman was basically the leader of ECW, the promoter, the spokesman. But I would say Tommy Dreamer was the clear-cut number two. He was right there through all of it, through ECW from 93 until 2001 when the company closed. Eventually in 2005, WWE rebooted ECW for a couple of pay-per-views, and then they even relaunched the brand. And Tommy was part of that relaunch. Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, I believe in 2011, summer of 2011, they did an ECW type of reunion show that Tommy Dreamer booked, meaning he wrote it or produced it type of thing. So
Cool.
Tommy Dreamer has been even more than Paul Heyman in some ways, believe it or not. Tommy Dreamer has really kept the flag flying for this hardcore grunge type of wrestling called ECW.
Yeah, and I think another way to kind of put it is it's like you said, it's alternative rock, it's the alt rock of wrestling. It's like you said, grunge. It's kind of like I've heard people compare it to the alt rock of wrestling. And the other cool thing about ECW is, they were seemingly like the little engine that could in an era where there were massive wrestling companies like the WWE. They were chugging along in gaining international and even in some respects worldwide popularity through this wild new brand of violent wrestling called Extreme Championship Wrestling. So Tommy Dreamer was smack dab in the middle of it. Like we said, he wasn't just a wrestler in the ring. He was involved behind the scenes. He was involved in editing the program. He was involved in the production aspect. I'm pretty sure he even helped with the merchandise. He literally did it all. So Tommy's a bit of a businessman as well as being a wrestler, and got a chance to kind of get a grasp of the behind the scenes world. Mike mentioned that in 2010, WWE rebooted that ECW brand, and also Tommy ended up working for the WWE behind the scenes, doing some creative work. Mike used the term booker. Booker is really just the word for writer in wrestling. In the world of pro wrestling, they don't use the term writer or screenwriter. They use the term booker a lot. It's changed over the years, but that's kind of the old school term that goes all the way back to when you would book, like literally schedule a card of matches, and you would literally write it down in a book. So that's why they're called the booker. And Tommy was one of those guys, behind the scenes, the man wielding the pencil, which they say is the most dangerous weapon in all of professional wrestling. It's the same way in the movie business. The pencil is a weapon in the movies as well, because if something's not going your way, if there's a creative issue, you can simply erase a situation and rewrite it to suit you and your best interests. So Tommy's a very kind of what I'd call in baseball, they use the term a five-tool player, somebody who can hit for average, hit for power, run the bases, do it all field. Tommy's kind of like that in wrestling, because he's got the ability to obviously put on a great match in the ring, got the ability to do some really dangerous things that most people probably wouldn't sacrifice their body for in the to get a reaction out of the audience and to entertain the audience. Most people aren't willing to go that far. And also just, we mentioned this, and you tend to see this in every aspect of entertainment. Most of the times, not all the times, but most of the times, the people that have longevity, the people that are around for a long time, they're usually nice people. They're usually good people. They're usually fair people. They're easy to work with. They're on time. You never have to worry about a guy like Tommy Dreamer no showing.
Right.
You never have to worry about him saying one thing and doing another. He's reliable, he's honest, he's trustworthy. Those are all great qualities in a wrestler. Those are great qualities in an actor, a friend, no matter who you are. So Tommy has all that going on. Now let's bring you up to speed. Let's talk a little bit about the first time that I got a chance to work with Tommy. This is going all the way back to my first movie, Self Storage, which If you go back into our archives, we did a whole deep dive on self-storage. You can check it out. It was my first film, so it's very special and near and dear to me. And as you can imagine, since it was my first movie, the cast was great. It had a solid cast. You know, Michael Berryman, obviously Eric Roberts was in the film. But then there was definitely room to add some unique pieces of casting, a little additional, a little side dish to go with your entree. Uh, and David Gear, who we talk about almost every episode, was working with us on that movie. He was producing it, and I'll never forget. He's kind of just chatting with me in the parking lot one night, and we had a scene coming up. I believe it was like the next day or the following day. It's really short notice. And there was this character called in the script. He's only mentioned as the big man because, you know, sometimes in scripts, if a character doesn't really do much, he's in one scene, but it's a big important scene because it sets up the movie. The big man character was just written as this like big tough guy, and the idea was that the tough guy would be strapped down, and the Eric Roberts character would essentially be harvesting his body parts. So the idea was you'd see this big scary guy who normally would be a formidable foe, and in the script he's written as like he's terrified, and it shows like just how dangerous and scary our main villain is because he's able to make this big scary guy kind of grovel for his life. As let's say hi to our and action faithful here. Kim, what's up? Good to
Hi,
see you
Kim.
this week. Anna, how you doing? Hello.
Hi,
Welcome.
Anna.
Little tribute to Tommy Dreamer that we're going to be doing here today. So basically, I've got this big man character, and I don't have anyone cast for it. And David was gonna kind of handle that one. He's like, "Oh, I got a couple of really big wrestlers." I was like, at the time, I wasn't thinking of anyone special. I just said, I just need a really big, dangerous looking guy, like the kind of guy who, if you saw, you wouldn't like think that you could take him, kind of a thing.
Right.
Uh, and he said, "Well, what about Tommy Dreamer?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you know Tommy Dreamer?" He's like, "Yeah, of course," you know. And at the time, David was like just getting into the independent wrestling scene and making some connections in those avenues. Um, he said, "Yeah, I know him. I got his number right here. I could text him right now." And of course, timing is everything in life, in business, in movies, in relationships. Uh, Tommy was looking to do more movie work. You know, I think every pro athlete, every wrestler, anyone who uses their body to make a living probably starts to look at the old clock, the old proverbial clock, and say to themselves, "Well, shit, you know, how much longer am I going to be able to physically take these bumps and do what I'm doing? Be great to transition into something else." He's a very charismatic guy. It makes sense, you know. Why not you've been in front of the camera your whole career. Acting's just a different way to get in front of the camera. So, long story short, I get on the phone with Tommy Dreamer. He kind of calls him up after there was a little interest in the text, and I was just shocked to be talking to him. I don't want to go into a deep dive here, but like I remember being 14 years old and watching my first ever ECW pay per view, and thinking it was really just like arresting, you know, like something that you needed to stop and watch because as a
Right.
teenager, a kid, you've seen kind of very much. Well, I don't want to say G rated, but almost like watered down WWE kind of wrestling on TV, and then you see this, and it's like it's probably like hearing rock and roll music for the first time, and like holy shit, what is that? So that's kind of what it was like to me, and I immediately took to a wrestler named Tommy Dreamer because my name was Tommy, and I was like, "Oh, Tommy Dreamer, that's kinda cool." People called me Tommy D when I was a kid. His name's Tommy Dreamer, so it just made sense that I would be a Tommy Dreamer fan. So talking to him on the phone, whatever this was, you know, almost 15 years later, I'm all grown up now talking to him, and he was not only interested, but very excited to come down and play this big guy character. And next thing you know it, buddy, he arrived on set.
Well, you about wrestlers and other sports people, football players, whatever, wanting to get into films. Part of that too, Tommy, is less bumps, more money. I mean, when I say bumps, that means the physical assault that they take on their bodies. Some experts have said that being in a pro wrestling match or in a football game is equivalent to being in a car crash. So for the average person, so Tommy Dreamer probably saw the opportunity to work with you and to get his feet wet and film as a big opportunity for him.
Yeah, it definitely was, Mike. And he showed up on set the next day, drove himself in from New York, where he's living, and he arrived with a special guest that he had with him, a young wrestler who was at one time his student named Thea Trinidad, who wrestling fans would now know better as Queen Zelina Vega in the WWE. Her career has just supernova exploded. It's really incredible what she's done. So Thea came with Tommy. They were buddies. You know, Tommy had mentored her. Like I said, he taught her how to wrestle. And then sure enough, they both arrive on set. I had a smaller part available for Thea as well, so they were both able to work in the film that day. And it was great. I got a chance to work with Tommy and see that he's, you know, as they say, one of us. You know, there's not a pretentious guy. There was no treat me like a star kind of quality to him. He was just ready to show up and pay respect to this kind of new world. And it's cool because I've had a lot of, you know, conversations with Tommy about things and how the wrestling business works. And he always would tell me that when you're a new worker in the business and you show up into a mysterious locker room that you've never been in with a bunch of new people that you've never met before and faces you've never seen, one of the first things traditionally that a respectable wrestler will do is they'll go up and they'll shake everybody's hand, everyone that they see. Doesn't matter if they're the guy folding towels or doing the laundry, whatever, cleaning, sweeping the floors. You respectfully go up and you shake everybody's hand and you introduce yourself. And I remember Tommy did that, and it was funny to me because as a, you know, rookie filmmaker, but still a filmmaker, I remember thinking that was almost unusual. Like, wow, here's an actor in the film, and he's like going up and shaking hands with all the PAs and introducing himself, and just a classy thing, man. One of those little classy things that sometimes get lost. And it's funny because when we think of professional wrestling, and I'm generalizing for the public, and I shouldn't do that, but I feel like a lot of people probably think of these big, like Neanderthal type guys, when actuality, there's a level of gentlemanly respect that happens in the back that, you know, it's almost like it's something from a forgotten time, that old school respect.
Well, there should be, and Tommy really embodies that old school respect. And the basic idea of that, in case people are wondering, is these guys who are 250 pounds on average, sometimes a lot bigger, they could really hurt their opponent. They could break somebody's neck, they could break somebody's finger, break a leg. And while the shaking of the hands, and sometimes they do that old school wrestler handshake, which I think Tommy Dreamer actually despises, but the wrestler handshake is so they could do a soft shake, like a two-finger little shake. And the idea is that we're kind of making fun of ourselves, that we're there's these big tough guys, but yet we're going to be soft with each other. The idea, in any event, of the shaking of the hands is just to say, hey, we're on the same team here. I'm trying to send you back to your family in one piece, and hopefully you return the favor. And especially in a world like ECW, where the violence was up a few notches, that's very important.
Yes, it's a subtle way of saying, I may look like a bad motherfucker, but I'm not going to kill you. Um, so that was that kind of sign of respect that Tommy gave to the entire crew on day one. I also remember it's kind of a funny thing to think of. You know, this was going all the way back to 2012. This was my first movie. And at the time, I remember chatting with Tommy Dreamer about Twitter. And I was just on Twitter. Like I might have just gotten on there. And Tommy was big on Twitter. He was kind of, you know, he's the innovator of violence. He was an innovator of a lot of things because he was one of the first guys that I knew that had a really big Twitter following and followed me. And I was like, holy shit, this guy's got hundreds of thousands of followers. He's following me. I got like 200 followers. This is fucking crazy. And I remember he told me that he was actually getting paid to tweet for various fitness supplements and things like that. And I remember, oh yeah, if I make a tweet, they'll give me some money. And every time I tweet, they give me this. And I thought that was like really fucking cool. And I remember like just chatting with Tommy, he was like one of the first people that I kind of like realized that like, wow, the world of like social media influential marketing is like a real fucking thing. Like we got companies paying people that have large followings to drop a tweet down. Now that sounds so commonplace, right? Like
Right.
there are literally uh portions of contracts that I've seen actors sign in my films that literally state that they have to say X amount of tweets or X amount of social media posts to market the film. So it's like so commonplace now to market on social media. But believe it or not, going back, 2012, that was all kind of new ground to tread. So Tommy was like right in on that social media kind of explosion as Stephen E checks in. Hey,
Hey,
folks,
Stephen.
happy Tuesday to you too, Stephen. Mikey gave you the
Well,
heads up there. Tommy Dreamer is the king of the extreme. It's funny. Something that happened in the mid 90s is still relevant today in the sense that there you go. Steven knows his wrestling, and everybody knows, like, you see Tommy Dreamer. If Tommy Dreamer to walk into an independent wrestling hall filled with fans and they saw him, they would start chanting ECW. They go ECW, ECW, like he's that kind of guy. It's kind of funny to be around him because he's such a regular dude that you almost sometimes forget like there is all this crazy fanfare for him in that world. Um, so yeah, King of ECW. Self Storage was a great time to work with him. He did a great performance opposite the one and only Eric Roberts. And it was great, man. Again, here's this big, scary guy who was able to show a vulnerable side of him in self storage. So we enjoyed that. We enjoyed him bringing Thea Trinidad along for the ride. And I got a chance to meet Thea and work with her. And then we all kind of hit it off. And I was lucky, man. Like it wasn't long before I made my second film, Army of the Damned. And sure enough, Tommy Dreamer, and of course, his Padawan learner, to use a Star Wars term, Thea Trinidad, comes along for that ride too. And we get to work together on Army of the Damned.
and they had big roles in that. And let me just speak on Tommy Dreamer's toughness real quick, Tommy. I was going to a lot of the ECW shows in New England. I'm not sure if you have an extra window open, bro, because I'm hearing echo of myself when I talk. Maybe maybe you do or don't. I don't know.
I do not.
Okay. So when I used to go the Extreme Championship Wrestling shows live in person in the late 90s in New England, Tommy Dreamer was a big part of those shows. And I got a press pass for a while to write the Foreign Object wrestling column. And I interviewed Tommy Dreamer, Paul Heyman, Taz, Perry Saturn, a bunch of the wrestlers after the shows. So, and of all the guys, like I said, from my perspective, Dreamer really stood out as the go-to guy to have a real conversation, not too heavy, not too light, what the goals of the company were. And there was one situation, Tommy, where Tommy Dreamer was actually suffering through a pretty nasty injury on his leg, a staph infection, which is nothing to joke about. It's something that could make you lose your leg. I mean, it's that serious. And Tommy was so dedicated to this world of wrestling and especially his company, ECW, that he was fighting through a staph infection and not bringing attention to it. He didn't turn it into an angle or a storyline where most of the fans knew, but because I was somewhat in a peripheral inner circle of sorts, I knew that he was suffering through a staph infection and still putting on a hell of a show for everybody. And that shows the work ethic and the integrity of this guy. And now he's doing something called Busted Open Radio, which is a wrestling podcast. He's continued in his career, but I just want to tell that.
Yeah, we'll get there for sure. Yeah, no, Tommy Dreamer is definitely, has exuded his toughness in many different ways just on my movie sets. So there's no question that I'm sure a staph infection was something that, a professional like a baseball player gets a staph infection, they're out for 2 weeks.
Right.
They're not playing. If they're playing the Cincinnati Reds that night, well, I ain't going to be playing in the lineup. A wrestler, you got to get hit by a fucking bus to not wrestle. These guys are on another level. There's another level of toughness. It goes all the way back to the old days when wrestlers were paid by the night, no salary. So if you didn't work, you didn't get paid, you don't eat. So these guys have a really crazy work ethic that I don't think the average Joe could really fathom. It's not really like anything that we would do. For example, the person who works in a cubicle at an office, and I ain't knocking that. Cubicle work, there's nothing wrong with that. You're making a living. That's great. But the person working in the cubicle, chances are they're not going to have the adrenaline of 1,000 or a couple thousand fans screaming their name, getting them fired up to go out and do their job in that cubicle. It's going to be their stuffy ass boss telling them what to do. They're like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to stay home. But when you know that there's thousands of people in the stands that paid money to see you wrestle, you get a little extra adrenaline fired through your ass to go out there and perform. And I think that's what a guy like Tommy Dreamer lives off of. As Charlie Short Films, good to see you, my friend. Welcome back.
Second week in a row, right?
2 weeks in a row that the timing has worked out with our friend there. We're chatting about wrestling here. Tommy Dreamer is the topic, and we're having a great time kind of just reliving these wonderful memories with Tommy. So let's talk a little bit about Army of the Damned, not to be confused with Army of the Dead. Everybody knows that I made my movie almost 7 or 8 years before that one came out. Where are my residuals for that title? You guys ripped it off. No, I'm just kidding. You didn't rip it off. Anyway,
not that you're bitter about it.
No, I'm not bitter about it at all. But yeah, Army of the Damned, which is a fun little sort of a zombie movie that I shot in my parents' house, my second film. And Tommy Dreamer shows up. He's playing the role of Officer Carposa, good old Italian boy, because Tommy Dreamer is half Italian, fellow Italian American.
What's the other half? Do you know?
Well, his name is Tom Laughlin, so I think that might be. Is that Irish? Is it Scottish? Is it English? Someone out there, tell me the origin of the name Laughlin. Sounds Irish to me, but I don't know.
I was going to say German, but I don't know.
No, you don't know anything. He's I'm pretty sure he's half Italian, half Irish, which is that's a common northeastern mixture right there, Irish Italian. You get that a lot.
That sounds like the perfect bar restaurant to me. I mean, you get your drink on, and you get your big lasagna and your chicken parm and your
chicken parm and a pint of beer.
Yeah.
Yes. So he's playing Officer Carposa, and I got a couple funny stories from that movie set. We're not going to get too into the film aspect. Today's more about just like personal fun stories, that connective tissue of humanity that makes us all people. God damn it. So they're overnight shoots, right? We're shooting overnights, which means we're getting in at like 6 p.m. and then we are wrapping at 6 a.m. So you better bring your caffeine to that one. So I remember, and Tommy's a tough dude. These guys, these wrestlers, they're used to, driving to a new town in the daytime, finding a gym, working out, doing a show, getting in the car at 11 o'clock p.m., and then driving 4 hours to the next town or home. So they're road warriors. So I'm not trying to take anything away from Tommy's toughness by any means. But one night I asked him just casually, hey, Tommy, how you doing tonight? And he just said, Tommy's got this kind of dry disposition sometimes. And he just looks at me and he goes, I'm tired. And I go, oh, you want some coffee? I'll get you a cup of coffee. And he goes, again, in his dry response, he goes, I've never had coffee. I go, what? You're 30-something years old. You've never had coffee before? No, just never drank. I go, all those nights driving to new towns, going to the arena, staying up, trying to get fired up you never had a coffee? I got to get you a coffee. I swear by this stuff. How do you think I do all these overnights? We're drinking coffee by the gallon. Get this man, get him a coffee. I'm like, no, I think I got it myself. I said, I was so excited. I was so excited to indoctrinize Tommy into the world of caffeinated beans, draining that succulent caffeine from the bean and putting it into his body. I was excited to do so. I got mine right here.
Me too, buddy.
He said, what do I do? Do I put sugar? Do I do cream? What do I do? I said, just have it black at first. Try it just black. So you just get the essence of the coffee. So he drinks it, man, and it was like a light bulb just went on, and he just loved it. And he loved it. And he was drinking it like cups after cups of this coffee. And it was like seeing like almost like a child who gets like a pixie stick for the first time.
Right.
Like, sugar. He just loved it. And that became like a little fun thing, like for a while. Like, because I remember he became like a connoisseur where he was trying every different type of coffee. A let me try putting a little skim milk in it. Let me try putting a little cream, a little sugar, a little this. Oh, I got these Starbucks to go ones you can get in the gas station. So like he just went full blown coffee nut. And I will, Tommy, you know this is true. I'm taking the credit for that. I got you into coffee. I don't want to hear anything else. I was the
He's good.
first cup poured. By the way, Mike, Charlie, who clearly is a little bit more educated on the origin of last names than we are,
Okay.
Laughlin is the anglicized surname of the Old Irish O'Loughlin. Just a, what? Charlie is a brilliant guy.
Thanks,
We love
Charlie.
having intelligent people with us here on And Action. I appreciate that. And I told you, Mike, I told you it's not German, Mike.
I want to check out Charlie's short films at some point, and I'll see if Charlie, if that's your YouTube channel, I want to check out your stuff. I gotta laugh at that story, man. That's like the third time I've heard that coffee story. I love it, and I just think of Tommy Dreamer coming in with like dark roast, Ethiopian blends, and French vanilla roasts, and that story. It reminds me of going on YouTube and I see these videos of the person with color blindness who puts on the special glasses and they can see color for the first time. And they start crying and getting all happy because they can see color through these scientific glasses.
No, it was like watching someone take their first step into the world of caffeine, which is great. Yeah, Charlie short films. We're going to check out your short films. No, it's not German. It's Dutch.
Right.
So moving on to another Army of the Damned story. This is kind of fun. So there was a big fight scene where, I knew I had a wrestler in the movie. So when you have a wrestler in the movie, if you don't have a cool fight scene involving your wrestler, you kind of miss the boat.
Right.
That's the whole fucking point to having him there. So I kind of rewrote a portion of the script to have an even bigger fight scene where basically all of the heroes are ganging up to try to fight Tommy Dreamer's character once he flips to the dark side and becomes zombified. So it's like a 5-on-1 battle. And I remember there was this heavy steel med kit. You know those old med kits that you'd like have installed on like the wall of a locker room?
Yeah.
We built this mobile command unit. It was like a vehicle that the cops drove in the movie. And there was a med kit. And the idea was Tommy's gonna rip that med kit off the wall, hit himself on the head to show how crazed he is, and then hit someone with the med kit. And that was how it was written. And we do the first take, and I just, I figured he knew that he wasn't actually going to hit himself on the head. Because again, like I'm thinking about how I'd talk to someone who's a regular, I don't want to say regular actor. That sounds like I'm undercutting what Tommy is. Tommy's a regular actor too, but someone who's not a wrestler would have just kind of like faked it. Like I didn't go over it with the coordinator. I figured he wasn't going to really hit himself. Sure enough, the first take, he takes that fucking med kit and he smashes it up against his head and he cuts his head and he's bleeding now.
Oh God.
I'm like, cut. Tommy, I think you got a little, it wasn't a big cut, it was a little blood. I think you got a little, blood right there. And he goes, oh, no. And it was like nothing. A regular person, a non-wrestler, a civilian, you cut your head and you see blood, you're going to freak. Most people would freak the fuck out. He's like, I didn't think I hit it that hard. And I said, hey, man, listen, you don't have to actually hit yourself in the head. Like from the camera angle I got, like you could come like even like this far from your head and it won't read on camera that you're not actually bludgeoning yourself with a steel object.
Right.
But in wrestler talk, that's kind of a foreign notion. Like, what do you mean? You want me to not really hit myself on the forehead with this metal object? So it was kind of funny to work through that. He got through it, and he eventually did not strike himself anymore. And then the final kind of fun Army of the Damned story that I can really remember was just let's see here. I think that was it. That kind of brings us to our next foray. But the last note that I wanted to say, I'm looking through my notes here because we do prepare for And Action. This isn't a goddamn willy-nilly free-for-all. We try to bring some subject matter to the table here. The last thing I just wanted to say was Army of the Damned was really a big family. We all kind of, when you're doing an overnight shoot, there's an extra bond there because you're all just kind of doing some weird shit. What are we doing up all night? What are we doing drinking beers at 6 a.m. because we just got out of work? Like it's this weird fraternity that ends up being created. So long story short, Tommy was a big part of that family. There was a lot of hanging out after set and chilling. And, I remember Tommy, David Chokachi, myself, and a couple of the guys, we all would get into some fun. Nick Principe and Tommy Dreamer hit it off. So, quite the little family affair we had on that movie. Um,
Hey, Tommy, right now the sun has kind of hit your shoulders on the top of your head. You look like Patrick Swayze in Ghost coming back from the dead to visit Demi Moore or something.
well, what's funny, Mike? You would think that that's an accident, but I actually hired an entire Griffin Electric team to put a 10K outside. This is today's and action episode's costing us about $25,000 just for the lighting alone. So I got a 10K there. I got a kicker light over there, and there's a big 10 by 10 set up, a big silk behind me. That's why it's nice and soft looking. Now just the goddamn sun here on the porch.
I always thought the Patrick Swayze Ghost should have hooked up with Whoopi Goldberg instead of Demi Moore, but in any event,
Come on now.
Tommy Dreamer, he's really got a great attitude, Tommy. I think there was one point where you invited me to go out to a Denny's late night meal with Tommy Dreamer, like literally down your street. He happened to be in town. And it was just so nice to talk to him in a relaxed environment over some pancakes and bacon and eggs, and just really a nice guy. He's got, I think the great thing about Tommy Dreamer is he has his role in pro wrestling and pro wrestling in the world of pop culture in pretty good perspective. And I think some other wrestlers that I've been friends with that they don't, to be quite honest. They kind of have an exaggerated sense of self or an exaggerated sense of pro wrestling in the world. And Tommy Dreamer, from my perspective, at least that night, had a very healthy attitude and a healthy self-awareness. And that was refreshing to me.
Mike, it's so funny, man. I forgot all about that night, and that really was a great random night, man. And I actually remember it too because so I have since retired from fantasy football. I'm retired. Okay. I'm not saying that I won't maybe come out of retirement someday, but for now I'm retired. I just don't have time for it. I'm an obsessive person. And when I get into things like fantasy football, it kind of takes over my life to a borderline unhealthy point of view where like it gets crazy. Like every morning I'm checking who's the free agents, who's injured. And it's like, you know what? I ain't got time for that shit. So I had to put that aside. But there was a time when fantasy football was a big part of my life. And I was in Tommy Dreamer's House of Hardcore Fantasy Football League, which I thought was really cool because there were a couple of other wrestlers in the league. I'd be making trades with like guys that I watched wrestling as a kid. It was kind of funny. But that night I remember because Tommy randomly called me. I won the fantasy football league and he had my cash for me. And he kind of hit me up and he's like, "Hey, Tommy," he's like, I just did a show in Massachusetts. It's not that far from you. I'm headed south back home anyway. Do you want to stop and get a bite to eat or something? And like, I'll give you this money. And yeah, we met at the fucking Denny's right down the street, which little known fact, wrestlers love Denny's. There are a couple of restaurants that are kind of like mainstays for pro wrestlers. Denny's, Waffle Houses. They're places that are, open late and you kind of like I've been wrestlers have told me it's because like what you're getting. You know what I mean? Like you can order the same thing in any Denny's across the country. You know what you're going to get. There's no surprises there. So it's kind of fun and fitting to meet Tommy at the Denny's. And yeah, we had a really just like low key chill night that night. I feel like I almost want to say like it was like a playoff game was happening. Like there might have been something good on TV. I just remember that being like a good night. Like there was something we were watching something at the diner, having a meal. It was great. Talking about stuff we love to talk about. Boy, that sun is blasting me.
It's okay. It's not that bad. It's just
I'm a nuclear. If you were a director of photography and you saw this shot,
right.
Either Bob Richardson is shooting the movie for Martin Scorsese, and he really wants to make a point of highlighting my shoulder, or they would be like, "Yeah, it looks a little hot right there. Might want to do something about that."
Yeah. Well,
this ain't a movie. It's the End Action Filmmaking Podcast. All right, let's keep it moving here, guys. So I'm going to just kind of briefly go over these, but this was Almost Mercy. Well, actually, I want to spend a minute on Almost Mercy because this was kind of fun for me. So, Almost Mercy was my third film, and it was the first film that I feel as though I got to actually be like an auteur, a director,
Right.
filmmaker, a storyteller. I had a lot of control on that film. A lot of that had to do with it was a very small movie, and I could creatively do exactly what I wanted to do. There really wasn't a part for Tommy Dreamer in the script of any serious substance. But there was this one part where there was this family man type dad who goes insane and kills his entire family. And I said to myself, "Ooh, that could be a fun role for Tommy Dreamer." Doesn't say anything, no dialogue, because it's all supported through a voiceover story. But there's something about Tommy that's very intense. Now, Tommy Dreamer's known for having a goatee. He's always had this goatee. And of course, he doesn't wear glasses. And I said, I got to make Tommy Dreamer look different for this movie. Now, Tommy's you used to seeing him in wrestling gear and a goatee. I said, "Well, let me put him in a shirt and tie. Let me have him shave the goatee completely so he's clean shaven, and let me put a pair of Clark Kent glasses on him." Suddenly, he looked like a completely different human being. He looked like someone's dad or somebody, that the accountant who used to play football in high school, you know what I mean? Or maybe played a little in college. Uh, so I told him, I said, "Tommy, listen, I really want you to do this part, but here's the one catch. That iconic goatee of yours has to go. Are you okay with that?" And he said, "Wow, really?" He said, "Yeah, I'll shave it. Yeah, fuck it. I'll shave it off. Okay." And I remember just seeing him in that appearance the first time. And this is for me at least. I know when I'm an actor, this is what I'm going for. And I think every actor should be going for this. I want to look at myself when I'm in character for the first time and say, "That's not Tom DiNucci. I don't know who the fuck that is."
Right.
Like, you're not supposed to look like yourself. If you look like you're not doing the job right in a weird way, if that makes sense. Unless the part is incredibly crafted to somebody who's supposed to be exactly like you. But the idea of acting is you're becoming someone else. So I loved the fact that he became someone else so much that Tommy Dreamer wasn't even really recognizable. And I bet you some of his fans have probably seen this movie and not even noticed that it was him. But he played this like really like insanely intense but oddly stoic performance as he kills his entire family, his wife and his son, and his wife's lover. Catches his wife in bed with another man. It's a great scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I'll go out on a limb and say it's one of my favorite scenes that I've ever directed, period, bar none. So check out Almost Mercy and watch for Tommy Dreamer's uh, bit of a cameo. Again, it's probably 2-3 minutes on screen, but some of the better 2-3 minutes that I've ever directed, and a lot of that has to do with Tommy Dreamer and what he brought to that day. And there's also a funny story at the end. Spoiler alert: Tommy Dreamer's character commits suicide and he hangs himself. And we had a rig set up where he was going to hang himself in the garage. That was how the dialogue was written. It says he kills his whole family and then he hung himself in the garage. And then it cuts to Tommy swinging in the garage. Well, we should have mentioned that this was on my notes for stunts, and maybe we'll revisit this in deeper detail on stunts too if we ever go back to it. But our stunt coordinator, Nick Principe, and John Del Ponte, our production designer, had built this rig that they screwed into the ceiling of the garage. And basically, there was a harness that Tommy would wear so that Tommy's obviously not going to hang himself. All the weight is displaced onto the harness, and then he can kind of fake hang from a fake noose. So we test it out. Nick Principe gets in the thing, gets into the rigging. Nick's like literally 6'6", 250, 60 pounds at the time. And John Del Ponte, who's probably weighing 250 at the time, 240 at the time. They both hang on the thing, right? So that's a combined, whatever. I'm not a math guy, but that's over 500 pounds hanging on this thing. So they were satisfied that, all right, well, this is 500 pounds hanging. Tommy Dreamer weighs, I don't know, 275. He should be good. What they didn't anticipate was they just sat on it like a swing. Tommy was going to actually be jumping off of a small footstool and hanging himself. They didn't
Right.
account for and I'm not a physicist, but they didn't account for like the weight coming down and what that impact and the force of that weight coming off of the stool and how that's going to yank the fucking thing right out of the ceiling. So Tommy does it, take one, jumps off of the stool as if he's going to hang himself. The whole rig flies right out of the ceiling. Pew! Saw that, dust and ceiling debris fall down, almost hit him on the head. This was like a thick metal bolt that was so if it hit his head, it would have, again, thankfully it was Tommy. It would have probably killed most people, but Tommy would have been fine. He didn't get hurt. He ended up just kind of landing on his ass and he got up. We looked at the rig. And here's where when you're making a film, you got to think quickly. You don't have a lot of time. Like I didn't have the time to repo this into the wall and see if maybe it'll work again. So we quickly adjusted fire. I saw a big old oak tree in the backyard that looked plenty sturdy. And I said, all right, we're going to hang him from the tree in the backyard. And sure enough, we rigged it. I remember Tommy got in the harness. He was very funny because, man, you can imagine the family jewels are getting
Right.
jacked up in that harness pretty bad. It was very uncomfortable, but he got it done. He was able to be still as can be and get this really dark, dark shot. I mean, it's one of the darker scenes that I've ever shot. We're all laughing and joking about this now, but it's a very intense scene, and it's nothing to laugh about. It's just we're laughing about how, it's kind of funny when it's not funny. Someone could get hurt, but when you're so cocksure something's going to work and it
Right.
doesn't fucking work. There's always a little element of humor there. But yeah, it's all about improvising, as Charlie says. And you know what? I'll tell you this much. I do think it's a better scene with him hanging from the tree. There's something about the stillness of the nature and seeing a human being just hanging from this tree. It's very dark.
Okay, Tommy, let me ask: was that scene one of the? Is that the opening scene? The murders. That's
It's
the way.
early in the film. It's not the opening scene, but it's probably within like the first act.
Yeah. Okay, that's how I remember it because it is a powerful scene. Yeah, I mean this, and like you said, Tommy, if this had been your traditional, not that there's any traditional actor, but if this had been a mainstream actor, let's say, they might have given you a real hard time about that situation. But Tommy Dreamer, having been through ECW, having been through the WWE, he knows that nobody was trying to hurt him on this film set. And he knows that you guys tested the equipment with 500 pounds of big guys. So he's a good sport. He's a good friend. And he has a great attitude. And overall, you've said this before, Tommy, on the show, wrestlers tend to give a little bit more when it comes to the physicality on being on a film set. I think a lot of times because they do feel like they're being valued more in many ways on a film set than they are by the traditional, con artist wrestling promoter. And I mean, as
Yeah.
crazy as crazy as the film world is, as crazy and with all the different characters and side swipes and false promises in the film world, it actually is a lot better than the wrestling world on an integrity front, at least from
Well, I'll
my
tell you what,
perspective.
buddy. I don't, it's hard to say it's better or not better. I will say this much. I've heard a lot of wrestlers, almost every wrestler that I've worked with say that it's very easy to compare the two worlds, the film
Right.
world and the movie world. And a lot of that, to validate your point, has to do with what you said. Producers are a lot like promoters. They're always often trying to get a little extra out of you. They would
Yeah.
always like to know that when they sign on the dotted line, they got the better of you in the deal. There's always a little bit of that goes on. So, as far as the languages go, it's very easy to communicate with wrestlers and get them to understand, as they say, how it all works in the back. You hear that term all the time in wrestling. What goes on in the back. It's a short word for backstage. Well, the truth is, a lot of the politics that go on in the back during a wrestling match are the same shit that happens in the back on a movie set. So these languages are kind of oddly interchangeable, and I think Tommy understands those languages very well. He's got a great grasp for all that. So yeah, and back to play to your point, Mike, a regular actor probably would have called their agent and said, "This kid's a fucking maniac. I almost fell from the garage. Get me out of here. This is an unsafe working environment. I'm never coming back." Now he wants me to hang me from a fucking tree in the backyard?
Yeah.
Are you goddamn kidding me? I'm gonna die when I fall from this tree. A lot of people wouldn't have even done the tree stunt after the fucking garage stunt went haywire.
Right.
So yeah, you're damn right. It was a good thing I had Tommy Dreamer on set. Um, all right, let's move on to. I'm not going to spend too much time on these projects, but there's a couple of movies that we actually got to act in together, where we were both acting in the movie. One is a movie called The Assault, which we've done a deep dive on The Assault, and Tommy sort of plays one of my henchmen, which was kind of funny. And that was a day where I was just kind of excited to get a chance to show Tommy Dreamer another side of me. You know, he'd seen the director side of me. This was a chance to kind of show him what I can do in the acting world and to chop it up with him. Same thing on the movie Blood Circus, which is another action movie shot in Connecticut, directed by Jacob Cooney. We talked about him on the show. David Gear produced that one as well. This one was cool because I had a small part and I was done by then. I was just like on set hanging out. I had already been wrapped. And I got to watch a really cool fight scene take place between Tommy Dreamer, David Gear's actually in this fight scene too, and Chuck Zito is involved in this one. And for the wrestling fans out there, uh, Robert Stone, aka Robbie E. He used to be Robbie E in TNA. He's now Robert Stone in the WWE's NXT. He was also in that scene. So you'll notice wrestlers kind of tend to hang together. They kind of roll in a pack. He also did a film called Know Nothings, which is a really great movie. My friend Claudio Orefici was involved in that, and I kind of got him the gig on that one. You know, Claudio was making this movie, and there was this role for like this kind of again like a big tough guy, a heavy. I said, you know what? You should give my buddy Tommy Dreamer a call. Kind of got him the hookup. He came in and he shot that.
That was in Newport, Rhode Island. Is that right?
That was in Newport, and I was really happy and proud. You know, Claudio, they did right by him. They put him up in a really nice place. They treated him right, and he got the treatment that he kind of deserves. Uh, I was bummed when Vault came along. You know, Vault was a movie that I really wanted Tommy to be in. I even had a part kind of set aside for him this whole time. You know, I'll often when I make a movie, especially a movie like Vault, which had a ton of characters, I'll make a big depth chart and I'll write right on the wall. You know, like I have a wall that I write on. It's actually insulation because it gets a little chilly here in the winter on my porch. So every year I'm putting up new insulation. So I just write on the fucking insulation, like on some John Nash, Beautiful Mind shit. And I remember writing down the whole cast of Vault, and I wrote Tommy Dreamer's name, and I had him ready to go. Uh, Casting agent called him up to book it, and I remember getting like kind of a heartbreaking call back from her, and she's like, "He can't do it." I go, "Why? Why can't he do it? He's got to wrestle." And I'm like,
Mm.
"Ah." He was already booked that week, and I just couldn't make the dates work out, so we missed out on that one. Um, but then there were a couple of other movies. We went into great detail on this one, so I won't do too deep of a dive on this. But the movie Saving Christmas, which had a wrestling backdrop where all of the kids at the end of the movie, the big third act set piece is the gingerbread brawl, the biggest
Right.
wrestling event in town, Christmas theme, fun. Um, well, I knew that I needed someone with credibility to sort of play the role of the commentator so that all of the beats of the wrestling could come off as authentic, genuine, for lack of a better word, real wrestling happening. And Tommy came in and he was terrific in that movie. He wore a suit, had a nice little Christmas themed tie. And I remember it was really funny. There's a scene where there's like a riot in the ring and he has to do this move where we've probably I don't know what this move is called, but it's the kind of move where he jumps, he's got to get out of the ring and he's got to like basically put his arm on the top rope and do a flip over the rope and essentially land on his feet, 10 feet below on the floor. So it's a very like athletic acrobatic maneuver, and it was funny to see a 260, 70, 80 pound guy in a nice black suit hit that move, pull off, flip over the rope, and kind of get out of there. So it was fun for that. And it was also great, again, having Tommy around to help me coordinate some of the in ring wrestling work was really helpful. He was kind of like almost like a wrestling consultant on that one, which is invaluable, man. You can't put a price on having a guy like that to make your shit look real.
Yeah, and as we've said, he's worked not only in the ring as an actual wrestler, but he does a podcast now, about wrestling with Dave LaGreca. He's booked shows, promoted shows, pay-per-views. He's really done quite a bit. I wouldn't say he's done it all. I don't think he's ever been a referee on a full-time basis, but that might be one of the few things he hasn't done on a full-time
Yeah,
basis.
who the fuck wants to be a referee?
You know, your buddy does, the Chioda.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so let's just see what some of our pals are saying here. So you introduced him to one of the most addictive substances on the planet, purple, purple crying. But yes, I did. I am what they call a caffeine enabler. I am responsible for all that comes with Tommy Dreamer's sudden arrhythmia. If it were to come up, any kind of heart palpitations, that's all
I'm
on me.
just impressed that Anna wrote out the emojis. Like she literally wrote what emojis she wanted. Like the emojis weren't available, so she wrote them out for our enjoyment. I appreciate that
That's
attention
old
to
school.
detail.
We
Yeah.
love we do love that. Coffee is the motor. That's right, and so did Charlie.
All right.
And orange covering eyes. We love it. We love it. Stephen E. Oh shit! Sorry, Stephen E. I accidentally just deleted your
You
comment.
deleted
Oh,
his
no,
comment.
he says facts. I'm sorry, buddy.
Very good.
Anna says, "Oh, I absolutely love that movie. I thought the wrestling backdrop was a great choice instead of the usual sports." Thank you, Kim. You know, that was just because we were writing that movie quick and I had to write something that I really knew and loved. Tommy, may I ask, when you are directing, do you use verbs to give them the right feel, directions? Oh, all the time. Absolutely. I mean, I can't help myself. I don't know if you can tell by watching the show, but I like to talk. I'm a little bit of a motor mouth, and a lot of times I'll use verbs to give them the right feel. Sometimes, you know, I always here's the one thing that I'm always careful of, and I'll with a less experienced actor, I'm less careful of it. But I'll always try to be mindful of I don't wanna give an actor a line reading. I don't wanna
Yeah.
say, you know, and then you say, "Blah, blah, 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 blah," just like this, you know, like, that always kinda makes actors feel like shit, but I like you said, would rather choose to use words that get their mind thinking in the direction. So, there is a little bit of a I don't wanna say trickery because that's to imply there's a level of deception involved, but there is a little bit of a game that's played where you need to say the right words to get them to understand what you're saying, and it's almost like a subliminal line reading. By being able to articulate the feeling and the emotion that you want so much, they're gonna say it like you want. However, I will say this, you know, I have worked with younger actors or, you know, not even to put age in question, just less experienced actors where if I'm not getting what I want on set and it's, you know, kind of a fucking disaster, you're damn right I'm gonna give give them a line reading because, you know, again, at the end of the day, when people watch the movie, if something's wrong, it's on me. People are gonna
Right.
say shit about me. They're not gonna say anything about the random performances here and there. At the end of the day, it's all gonna come back to me. So, like, yeah, I will give a line reading every now and then, but I'd much rather, like you said here, give a little subtext.
Hey Tommy, have you ever noticed that if a movie is great, people praise the actors, but if a movie is not so great, they blame the director?
You know, that's a whole different story for another day, but you're absolutely right. It's funny how, oftentimes being critical with films is kind of like a, there are no rules to it. You know, if you don't like a director, you can say, "Well, that film wasn't accurate at all." But there are so many great movies that aren't accurate that nobody ever gives a shit about. So it's one of those
Right.
things where, like, there's so many things, for lack of a better word, things to poke at that, like, yeah, if you wanted to be brutal, you could rip apart any movie you wanted. You know, it's like you could say The Godfather is not accurate. That's not actually how it
Right.
went down in the mafia in the '40s. It's the greatest movie of all time. Fuck off. That's what I have to say about people like that. All right.
Yeah.
Stephen E., go through the text line, figure out what the writer's intent, and write their line and how it makes you feel. That's a great exercise. You know, that's definitely a great way to study the dialogue, and just figure out what's there. And that's where sometimes you'll find a line feels false and maybe come up with something else or ask the director if you can change something. But let's go back to Tommy Dreamer, damn it. We're here to talk about Tommy Dreamer. We got a couple more stories as we wind things down. We're going to chat for another 10, 15 minutes here on a Tuesday. Let's talk about Agent Toby Barks, a kids movie that we've yet to do our full form episode on. But Agent Toby Barks is a movie that a friend of mine, wink, wink, Dan Hunter directed with Tommy Dreamer. Dan also wrote the script, but I was very heavy-handed in the collaborations with Dan to make that movie. Dan and I, at times, have been like brothers, thick as
Yeah,
thieves. So,
you
and then
almost have to think like you think almost with the same mind at times.
Dan's a weird guy because we're like the same exact person, but then we'll literally go like fucking years without seeing each other.
Right.
Mm. And then what? But then when we do hang out, it's like no time has passed, which I
Yes.
guess is a sign of true friendship. So Dan Hunter made this film. It
We're true
stars
madness.
yeah, it stars Tommy Dreamer, and this was a chance for Tommy to play a very lovable, friendly character. He's Agent Hawk. He's kind of, this is a kids movie. It's about literally a talking dog who's a secret agent. The dog is a secret agent, people. You understand what I'm saying? He has the ability to fight crime. And Tommy is basically one of his assistants, or one of his, I guess you could say, one of his team members. It's his partner in crime, or partner in protecting, or partner in fighting crime, I should say. So that's Arlo the burping. Oh, I'm sorry. That is
Spy Dog.
Agent Toby Barks, which is
Agent.
also it is known as Spy Dog in the European markets. So if you're overseas and you're looking for this one, it's called Spy Dog. This was fun, man. It was a lighthearted performance. It was a chance for Tommy Dreamer, a guy who is always embroiled in some kind of a street fight. There's always blood, guts, barbed wire, flaming tables. This was a chance for him to do something a little calm, a little friendly, something for the kids. Tommy Dreamer is a father. He's got two twin girls. He calls them the Twinnovators, which I always thought was really funny because he's called his nickname is the Innovator of Violence. Well, he calls the girls the Twinnovators, so I always thought that was fun. And a little, so my point is, like, Tom's a family man. He's got that side of him too. So it was probably nice for him to do a lighthearted film. Also, quick,
Wasn't it, Tommy? Wasn't that John Lovitz? Didn't he do the voice of Agent Toby Barks? Am I getting that right?
yes, John Lovitz, who to me is one of the funniest people alive. I got a
Oh
chance
yeah.
to hang out with John Lovitz, and it was just like one of the best like 4 or 5 hour stretches of that I can remember. The guy just had me laughing the whole time. And we'll go into detail on my work with John Lovitz when we do a deep dive on Agent Toby Barks. Another cool thing, Tommy, this is a low budget movie, and we had a lot of fight scenes and things like that. And Tommy was basically acting as my impromptu stunt coordinator because I'll be honest with you, we didn't really have the money to hire an official stunt coordinator. So he came in that day and worked a little double duty and was working with the actors to show them how to properly fall, how to properly take a shot. Also, I just mentioned the Twinnovators. Here's a funny side note that a lot of people probably don't know. Tommy Dreamer's twins played the twins in The Sopranos. If you look, I believe it's Tony's sister has daughters in the film, and those two little girls in The Sopranos are Tommy Dreamer's twin girls, which I always thought that was kind of a little unique connection to an iconic series like Sopranos. Charlie Short's film says, "Thank you, Tom and Mike and Stephen, for your answer." Of course, man, that's what we're here for. We love you know, everybody who's watching along, never be afraid to drop down a question or a comment. Yeah, we make notes for these shows, but we're gladly to freestyle and go off the beaten path to have a conversation about something else if it involves movie magic. That's what we're here for.
Hey, Tommy, just on that, the Twinnovators, this match that Tommy Dreamer had against Raven on pay-per-view, their final battle, so to speak, 2011, the Hardcore Justice pay-per-view, which Tommy booked himself, but him and Raven are having this battle. And at ringside, and there's blood, of course, at ringside is Tommy's wife, Beulah McGillicuddy. That's her stage name. And the twin daughters, she's the mother of these two daughters. And they were probably 9 or 10 at the time. And they're watching their father and, his father's best friend / worst enemy, Raven, beat the crap out of each other. And I think at one point, Raven even comes over to them to intimidate the Twinnovators and the mom. And it was just good drama. And when these wrestlers have their, A-level game on, there's really not much better as far as the world of dramatics.
It's a wonderful form of entertainment. You know, a lot of people say to me, "How could anyone watch pro wrestling when you know that it's fake?"
That's the whole
I feel
point.
like saying, "Hold on, let me handle this one." I feel like saying, "Yeah? Well, how do you ever read a book? Because guess what? That shit's fake. How do you ever watch a movie? Guess what? They ain't really shooting each other in these fucking movies. It's all fake. Everything you're watching is fucking fake. So don't come out and say wrestling's fake, okay? It's creative. It's predetermined. The outcomes are predetermined. It's written. But there's nothing that happens in that fucking ring that's remotely fake. And I do take offense when people say that. But that's the biggest thing that I love to say. Like, oh, it's fake. Every fucking movie that you've ever watched is fake, motherfucker. That's what I have to say. Pardon my French. It gets me upset.
Well, Tommy, as a Frenchman, I'm not offended. And when people, I mean, look, some people think the man walking on the moon was fake. That was a film made by what's the filmmaker that they say made that one? Stanley Kubrick. You know, and some people say the JFK assassination was was orchestrated and not just a single gunman. So I mean, who's to say? The wrestlers have an expression. You've probably heard this one. Believe half of what you read and none of what you hear. And the wrestlers say that all the time about not only their own business but about the world in general. And I've kind of grown into agreeing with that
You know
because
what it is, Mike? It's low hanging fruit when people say that. It's just a low blow. It's an easy knock.
sure,
Uh, it's just again, it's like come up with something better if you want to insult something that clearly millions and millions and millions of people love and watch and tune in on a weekly basis. You know, the numbers really don't lie. Clearly, people like this shit. So just get off of the whole wrestling is fake shit. It's really just a tired fucking argument that I'm so sick of hearing. Um, yes, even politics, exactly. Like to me, pro wrestling's a lot more real than any politics out there.
you know,
It's sports entertainment, damn it.
the
Yes.
spirit of Road Warrior Animal is with you today in your vengeful defense of the business.
Yeah,
Animal is
look,
very
look, you
happy.
ready? Look, we're both doing the
Yeah. Animal is very happy with this outrage and this rant of yours
yeah,
defending the
you gotta,
business.
it's okay to have a little rant once in a while. Make sure that you're alive. Let's finish this thing up. All right. So my most recent, well, not my most recent film, but one of my more recent films, Johnny and Clyde, starring Megan Fox, which will be coming out later in March, you know, not too far down the road. I believe
Talk about an influencer.
March 17th. That's
Yeah.
word on the street. Johnny and Clyde, starring Megan Fox, a movie that I co-wrote with Nick Principe and directed. Well, Tommy Dreamer was smack dab in the middle of that one as well. Tommy plays the chief of security at a casino, and basically is kind of leading the charge on an attack on these thieves that have entered into the casino in order to rob it. So Tommy plays the head of security, and it's a scene where the order is to keep the thieves alive. We want them alive. We want to find out who these people are. Don't kill them, kind of a thing. So Tommy and his group of security guards, armed with collapsible batons, basically start a battle with Nick Principe's character, and it's this great, like, you know, 6-on-1 fight with batons and everything else. And Tommy was very influential in coordinating some of the moves. And there was this really funny scene where basically at one point Nick Principe's character is being held by two guys. Each guy has an arm and he can't move, and Tommy Dreamer is just wailing on him with these shots. And then the tables turn like they must in any fight, where basically Nick gets punched and then he, in the script, spits a bloody chunk of whatever at Tommy's character's face, temporarily blinding him. Then he uses the other two men that are carrying him as leverage to kind of donkey kick Tommy. So it's written that he's going to spit in his face. And Nick and Tommy are very close. They've known each other for years. And I remember it was really funny. Nick kind of like downplayed it. Like, well, I was like, wait, how are we going to do this spit in the face thing? He's like, well, I can spit in Tommy's face. Tommy, can I spit in your face? And Tommy's just like, once. You can do it one time. And I was like, all right, we got one take at this. Let's get it in there. And Nick's, before action's called, he sips on a little cup of fake blood and puts it in his mouth. And action, spit take, right into Dreamer's face. I looked at the monitor. All right, we got that. We don't have to do that one again. Thank you, Tommy. And it's funny because it's one of those things where you can't even be like, all right, let's clean him up, wipe that off. It's like kind of got to keep that on for continuity. But that was fun. And again, Tommy was super gracious. And hey, look, it never hurts to butter up the director with a little set gift. I remember he brought me a box of cards, which was really cool. Everybody knows I collect trading cards of all kinds, sports, non-sports. You want to butter me up? Send me some cards.
Was it baseball or wrestling or what type?
These were baseball cards. Tommy Dreamer. We'll talk about that. That was my last story. I'm just gonna kind of wrap this up. Just fun times are always had with Tommy. He's always just a phone call away. He's always a text away. I've been in this business for about 15 years now, and the truth is, people come and go. Relationships you think you're best friends with someone, and then you text them 6 months later, and crickets. So
Right.
you just never know what kind of real deal friendships you're gonna craft on your road in the world of movies. Well, I got a real deal friend in Tommy Dreamer, and to this day, anytime I shoot him a message, he hollers back. I can almost guarantee he's going to help us promote this show. I bet you he'll share this one out there for us. So thank you in advance, Tommy. And we will definitely have to work again together on something. A couple of other fun little, just friendship notes. I remember one time Tommy was wrestling a show with Total Nonstop Wrestling Action in Lowell, Massachusetts. Hey, you guys want to get tickets to this thing and come see me wrestle? Hell yeah, we do. Me, Nick Principe, John Del Ponte, we piled into the car. We drove the hour or so to Lowell, Mass. And I remember him just like, we weren't watching it like fans. No, no. It was like, oh, come in the back. And suddenly I know it. I'm backstage at this wrestling show. I'm meeting all the guys. I'm getting a chance to see Tommy Dreamer in his element and getting to see the level of respect that all those wrestlers give him and how he is like, team captain in the back, so to speak. And you can see that it's palpable. You can just tell that people kind of like look at him like he's the team captain back there. I'll never forget he introduced me to Kurt Angle, who's a big wrestler out there. Wrestling fans certainly will know about the former Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle, who's a legit shooting athlete, as they say. Won a gold medal in '96 in Atlanta, heavyweight wrestling gold. So I got a chance to meet Kurt Angle, and super, super nice guy, very gracious backstage. And it's always helpful when you meet someone and you get introduced by a respectable person. You get vouched for, as they say in the gangster business and the mafia. He vouched for me.
Yeah, respected individual like Tommy Dreamer carries a lot of clout with those guys.
He really does. So it was fun to do that event and go watch that. Tommy Dreamer has a really creative side to him. We flirted in the past with the idea of, he's always I've told him, I'm like, man, I would love to work in wrestling someday. I would love to do some form of creative writing in the wrestling world. And Tommy's always been like, yeah, man, one of these days, maybe we'll make that happen. Like I think there was one time where we almost came close. It was almost a time where like I was gonna fly out and like hang for a weekend or two and maybe write some wrestling stuff, and it just didn't materialize. It just didn't, come through. I think Tommy ended up moving on to a different company or something like that. But that's something that in the back of my head, I'm always like, yeah, maybe I'll get called upon someday to do a little creative work in the wrestling world. Never say never, buddy. It's always something that could happen down the road.
Well, Tommy Dreamer's no stranger to startup wrestling companies. He had his own group, House of Hardcore, that our buddy DG Haven was a manager in. And I could be wrong, but I think Tommy Dreamer was actually very helpful to Cody Rhodes and those guys when they did the All In show, about 4 or 5 years ago. That was the predecessor to All Elite Wrestling. I think Tommy Dreamer was right there in the mix, along with Diamond Dallas Page and Billy Gunn, and Arn Anderson is kind of like the veteran wrestlers that were helping out the young guys promote their very first independent show. So uh, all these years later, from the grunge era of ECW to 2020, 21, 22, 23, Tommy Dreamer is still a player in this business.
And he's still getting it done, Mike. I just saw on his social media the other night. He made a tweet about something like, and I'm paraphrasing, but 4 a.m. wake up, flight to wherever, wrestle at this time, drive home from this town, get to the airport, and it's like the schedule that these guys work. Tommy's still working a crazy pace, and the reason why we decided to do this show today is because in a couple weeks, less than a couple weeks actually, uh, February 13th is going to be official Tommy Dreamer Day. It's going to be his birthday. So, congratulations on another trip around the sun, Tommy. We love having you here and we appreciate all you do. And here's something, word to the wise for all filmmakers out there. Tommy will always be one of my go to guys. I think all filmmakers should have people like that in their corner. I'm not saying you have to cast the same people in every movie, all right? But it's nice to know that there are no surprises with a particular piece of talent. It's nice to know that when they show up, they're genuinely going to give you everything they got. They're always going to be on time. They're going to be polite and respectful to every person on set. And at the end of the day, you can rely on them. So if you don't have someone like a Tommy Dreamer in your acting Rolodex, I recommend you go out and get someone like that so that you know that I've got a group of people that, again, you don't have to do it every single movie, but they're going to be there for you if you really need them. So surround yourself with good people and don't be afraid to work with the same actors, a few times if you like working with them. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of a thing.
Let me just say something about that, Tommy. I've seen independent filmmakers, up and comers, so to speak, where they work with an actor or two and they get some great performances and the actor does well. And then for their next project, they go and don't even consider that actor for the next project. And I'll ask why didn't you consider that actor from the first project for your second one? Oh, I just want to do something new. And that seems okay. I mean, that's fine, but it's like, you know, I feel like sometimes there's discrimination against the familiar people you've worked with that have proven themselves rather than work with them again or reward them with opportunities at least to audition for the next piece. It seems like some of these directors just want to start from scratch each and every time. And it may be a way in their mind to network to more people, but in my mind, you're kind of losing the idea that you're fostering the talent. You're helping the talent get better and get more name recognition, even in a small way. So why not cash in on your own investment by working with that same talent again? And of course, I'm speaking in broad strokes here, but my point is, if you do meet people like a Tommy Dreamer that you've worked with that have come through for you, why not work with them some more, or at
Yeah,
least keep them in the
again,
loop?
it's all about building rapport with people, and there's nothing wrong with having that with actors. And as Charlie Short say, uh, you know what they can do. It's so convenient, and you bond with them. Exactly. He says, "So true. I thought I was crazy to ask the same actor." But here's the thing, guys. I'll come right out and say it. Like I try to model myself after the greats as much as I can. You got to try to learn from the best. Well, when you see someone like Martin Scorsese working with Robert De Niro time and time again, Joe Pesci time and time again, and now in some of his more current films, Leonardo DiCaprio time and time again, you build a relationship with these actors and you want to go on that journey. Every film is a journey, man. It's a fucking adventure. And you got to make sure that you got the right people in the cockpit of your spaceship as you're on that adventure. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think it's it's certainly not a scarlet letter that your movie will wear. Like, oh my god, I can't believe same actor again. Who cares, man? You know what? Go out and make a good fucking movie, and no one will give a shit who's in the movie if it's good. Nobody's going to be thinking about those things.
Yeah.
Remember, quality is going to trump all potential nitpicking. If the movie's good, no one will care. All right, guys. Again, I can't thank you enough for watching along with us. It was really great to have these conversations. Shout out to everybody who chatted along today. Um, and again, we appreciate all support. If you wouldn't mind throwing this out there, put it on a story. I guarantee you, if you at me in your story on social media, on Instagram, I am going to put it up on my story. You got my word. So feel free to promote this show. I will share it out. And, talk about it amongst the film community, get the word out there. Next week, we're rapidly approaching that fictitious Hallmark holiday known as Valentine's Day. Don't be afraid to call your lovers up and tell them how much they mean to you.
Plural?
We're gonna be getting into that mode. We're gonna get into that lovey-dovey mode, and
Sure.
we're gonna talk about a romantic comedy that I had a nice little part in called Mistaken. Not mistaken, Mistaken. It's a fun kind of a tale of mistaken identity with a romantic backdrop, directed by Andy Lawrence. And I'm really excited. All the Lawrence brothers are in this one. Joey Lawrence is in it. Matthew Lawrence is in it. Really cool cast. Sabina Gadecki. I play a quirky security guard. It's probably like one of my first like straight up comedic roles the whole way. Like it's just
Right.
he's just there for laughs. So it was a lot of fun. The character I played his name is Birdie. So we're gonna have some fun with that one next week. So this week, if you got some downtime, take a look at Mistaken. Punch it in your Google machine. I'm sure you'll find it, and we can talk about it next week.
Tommy, is that second word taken? Taken or
Staken. So it's
staken?
Thank you. That's a good point, Mike. It's Mistaken. Staken. Her name is Valerie Staken. That's the character's name.
I was thinking if it was like a romantic comedy, like Mistaken, like she's already taken. But in any event, I'm looking forward to watching that one myself, Tommy. And yeah, man, you're gonna have a big year this year. Johnny and Clyde coming up with Megan Fox. Talk about a social media queen. And I'm happy to have subscribe to Mike Messier YouTube channel up. This show in action is on Tom DiNucci YouTube channel, so please subscribe to both. And once again, the copy and paste of the URL helps so much. When I say that, I mean share however you do it on your computer. Share the show, but I like the copy and paste URL method because it tends to get the best thumbnails shared on social medias. But yeah, man, this has been a fun show. Tommy Dreamer, thank you for your years of service in pro wrestling and film. And we look forward to seeing what he's going to do next.
All right, guys, thanks for watching. We will see you next Tuesday.